Good morning, my friends. Thank you for coming this morning. In a few places in the Buddha's teachings, he gave instructions on how to begin practice. And there's two that are frequently there. One is with gratitude and love. And by our way of connecting before we drop into silence, I invite you, if you wish, not required, turn to a neighbor and tell them one thing for which you are grateful. We'll have just a couple of minutes to do that. Sure doesn't take long for a group of meditators to get yakking, does it? Please join me in, doors are closed and cross-check. Please join me in turning off your great distractors. Please raise your hand if you're here for the first time today. Wow, lots. Welcome. I like to say to you, if you're here for the first time, I hope this is really nourishing. In fact, I hope it transforms your life. And if this isn't a fit, you're obviously on a quest. Keep looking, because in Portland, there are representatives of all the great spiritual traditions, and you can find one that fits. So let's stop. At least stop with the body, park the body. Yes, I'd like to say it's just a little over a year now. Friday was the anniversary of my teacher Ruth Denison's death. And we owe a great gratitude to her. This place would not exist without her. It was 14 years ago or so that she wrote the first check for $10,000 and handed it to me and said, "Start a center." And I went, "Eee!" And then we bought this building a little over 11 years ago. I guess to tell you one more thing of that. When you come in, there's a sign, just a little sign, over the door to this room. It says Ruth Denison Dhamma Dina, which is her Buddhist name, meditation hall. And when she gave me that first check, she said, "Darling, I was thinking of having this money be available DOD, which means delivery on death. But I decided instead that I'd like to see my name on something." So we had that done, and when we had the grand opening, I showed her that specifically. It's like, here it is, here's the sign. So gratitude for the legacy of that amazing person. So as people have done now for thousands of years, we park ourselves. We stop and sit down with the intention of cultivating mindfulness, presence, non-judgmental awareness of what occurs inside us and around us in successive moments of consciousness. And that simple but difficult to remember practice leads us to choice, the capacity to make wise choice in our behavior. So we sit comfortably upright. And we undertake this practice of observing the body and the mind. And it's all about learning how to live in the present moment, right here, right now. And the body exists always only now. It's the abstraction capacity of the mind that creates the past and future. So we're invited to come home to this body that sits here. Notice how alive it is. It's nothing but life. It tingles, it vibrates, it's warm, it's cold. Come home and notice the life in your hands without any descriptions, just life. The life in your face. The life which arises with the coming and going of the breath. Noticing that the breath has a beginning, it rises to fullness, and then it declines and vanishes. We live in very extroverted times where the solution to problems is always seen, or most often seen, as action or intervention or doing. So most people bring that strategy into meditation, and it becomes a trying to do something, to change something. In this era of the war on some drugs and the war on terror and the war on this and that, the war on cancer, we tend to have a war on the mind. Let's instead practice peacefulness and lovingness, which means that there's room for everything that arises, including the wandering mind. The cacophony, the obsession, the anxiety, the worry, the storytelling of the conditioned mind simply is. And mindfulness illuminates it. And that very illumination is the most potent intervention possible. In the words of Krishnamurti, the seeing is the doing. We can add as a practice, as a strategy, when awareness discovers the mind wandering, worrying, planning, etc., ever so gently but persistently, come home to the sensations of breathing in and breathing out. So this is the dance of practice. Awakening, aware, breathing. Awake and aware, breathing in, breathing out, sensations in the chest and abdomen. for those new to practice or to this practice. Frequently, the degree to which the mind is out of control is very unsettling. Doubt can arise. I must be doing something wrong if this mind is so out of control, or this is clearly the wrong practice for me. Mindfulness is the non-judgmental, accepting, friendly, knowing of what's actually happening in the moment. And this includes the desire and aversion and restlessness and sleepiness and doubt that arise as part of the ecology of mind. This moment is like this. everything on this side of the great flash or the Big Bang has a beginning and an ending. When matter and antimatter appeared out of nowhere, change began. So we're not only calming down the mind, or relaxing the physiology, as we observe the coming and going of the breath, of thoughts, of emotions, of perceptions, of stories of past and future. We're also carrying out the great experiment, and it is truly a scientific experiment. Can we find something that lasts? Something that's not in thought or in imagination, but something that exists directly at the sense doors. The mind is attentive to the breath coming and going, and it has a beginning and ending. And then awareness disappears, and then there's wandering mind. And then one after another, thoughts arise and disappear. Our task is simply to be aware, non-judgmentally, persistently, again and again and again and again and again. To notice this anicca, not permanence. In general, we humans move much of the time. As soon as discomfort arises, we adjust our posture. This is important for species survival, moving away from discomfort. But for the purposes of meditation, sometimes at least we just sit still, even in the midst of pain. We develop the capacity to be conscious with discomfort without flinching. To not have to act in a certain way to get away. This moment is exactly as it is, like this. In just a few moments, 2 gongs will ring. The first is kind of a wake up, be here. And the second, most often misunderstood as the end of meditation, is the signification or the indication that the life of meditative practice is about to take a different form. It's part of the development of continuity of awareness for whatever comes after you do your formal sitting practice. Please raise your hand if you experienced any wandering mind. More than 50%? It's quite a zoo, isn't it? Human mind. Well, Mr. Jim, would you be willing to lead some mindful movement? After Jim does this, we will have announcements, and then I'm giving a talk on fear and anxiety today. So that you may all flee. It's like, no! Forget it.
So Robert mentioned that we can begin our seated practice with gratitude. We can also begin our standing mindful movement practice with gratitude. Gratitude around our sense of balance. So if you'll join with me, we'll explore that a little bit. If we put our feet close together, maybe 2 inches apart, and just extend one hand forward and then out. Watch out for the person next to you. Feel how there's an alarm system in your body that says, wait, that's too much weight over there. I better readjust, and take your other hand and feel that edge where the body gets uncomfortable reaching, and especially in the back. It's like, well, where are you going? But there's this sense of balance, there's this intelligence in the body. And when you open the stance and make it shoulder width apart, you have a lot more willingness to stretch, a lot more flexibility, a lot more willingness to go backward. There's just a wider base so that problem-solving part of us, where's the edge of balance, gets broader and we get more flexible. And then if we take the street side foot and turn it 45 degrees and bring the tree side foot forward, take that same hand, the tree side hand, and go forward, and notice how much more flexibility you have and more confidence to take the center of gravity in a big, wide exploration around. And if we switch, take the tree side toe and turn it and bring the the street side toe forward, and you see the intelligence of the body. When it has a wider base, it has a lot more confidence and a lot more flexibility. So what we're going to do is the first few movements from the Shibashi from the standpoint of the second stance, shoulder width. It's not as rich as the third one, but it's plenty. And then we're going to watch how the body awareness can be built out of this base. So we'll sink, let the knees bend, then let the arms rise, let the shoulders open a little bit and come down, and just notice that by expressing the intention to rise, your legs and your arms work together, probably because of some motor neural network that I can't describe in words, but I can feel it. And if we set it up with a particular rhythm, there's a kind of a resonance that goes through the whole group. Working in a group with a whole bunch of people doing the same movement in the same rhythm does something very soothing to the nervous system. And it gives us a way of exploring impermanence. How many moments of awareness can we be conscious of during this simple pumping action? There's nothing constant. There's always change. There's a little bit of change here and here and here. How many moments are there? So we take this fact of life that everything's impermanent and we make it a way of connecting with other people. It's kind of a miracle. If I say, let's start again and open wide, several things happen. We take in more oxygen, our lungs are able to fill, and then sinking again. We're still working with other people, so there's this resonance with other people. We're all feeling better because we're getting more oxygen. It's a contagious disease, this mindfulness stuff. And it's not just a simple motor movement like pulling your hand away from the stove. It's a conscious monitoring of speed and intensity. It's a much fuller use of the brain. We're paying attention to how everybody else is moving. We're not poking our neighbor in the ear. And we've built on that simple pumping action, and now we're breathing a little deeper, soothing the nervous system with our friends. Okay, so that's 2 of the 18. I'm not going to keep this pace going for 18, don't worry. All right, now we're going to open the arms and reach up with one arm and look over to one side and reach out with the other and paint a rainbow and feel how that wide base in the feet allows the hips to shift a little bit. We have a lot of weight. Each hand weighs about 5 pounds. So we got 10 pounds over here. And so the hip moves in such a way to balance that. And we didn't decide to do it. It's the intelligence of the body that balanced this movement. So again, we're working with other people with intention. We're harmonizing our actions. Our lungs are really expanded now. The heart's moving a little faster to get blood pumped way up in the air here above our heads. Then we'll bring both hands up, separate the clouds, and sink. Again, monitoring the speed with our neighbors, crossing the wrist, coming up, imagining the clouds opening above, soothing the nervous system, and sharing that sense of relaxation and healing, really, with everyone else. So mindfulness of every change. Each moment unfolds into the next. And we're doing it as a group. One more. Now we're going to turn the body, opening the palms towards the sky, bringing one hand in and pushing with the other hand. The wrists change. One is holding the palm up, the other switches. We turn the wrist. So there's a little bit of a wringing out the dish rag kind of thing in the tendons and the muscles of the arms. We're not just moving through space, we're massaging. We're massaging the inner organs by pulling the hip back to balance this weight in front and back, and pulling the other hip back as we switch sides. It's twisting the torso a bit. Liver and the spleen get a little massage. All this openness in the shoulders is massaging the heart and the lungs. So this healing process is being shared by all of your friends at the same time. Isn't that amazing? It's a little different than taking an aspirin. Building continuity of consciousness. Where does the form begin and where does it end? It just keeps flowing. Now moving the arms back and overhead, kind of like a big water wheel. We're still doing the same thing with our legs. We're just pumping up and down, feeling the power and the energy in the thighs, and then trying to be as relaxed and open and free with the shoulders and the arms. So they're just floating. The legs are doing the work. So there's a different feeling. It's not positive and negative. It's a feeling of floating versus a feeling of agency and determination and power. And the legs have this capacity to pump us up and release down. Resist gravity and fall into it. Okay, let's just hold still for a second and feel the life in the body. So that's the first section of the 18-step Shibashi program. And that program was set up by physical therapists to send people home from clinic or hospital to start to recuperate from medical treatments, and just build the strength in the legs, build the capacity for breathing, loosen the joints, and then there's 3 more phases of the 18 steps, 3 more sections. Each one gets a little more demanding, a little more powerful. But we're going to skip to the third one for a second and just, again, turn the street side toe 45, and the opposite leg is just right down the center of the axis of the room. And then when we splash in the sea, we're pumping energy into one leg, and when we rock back, we're making the opposite leg work. So we set up a front and back polarity instead of up and down. And again, the body knows how to do this. We've got all this weight out here and up there and down there, and the body adjusts. So we just be aware of the intelligence of the body. a feedback system operating with every aspect of this movement. One more time. Then we'll turn and step towards the trees outside, and the same kind of 45-degree angle between the 2 feet, 1 foot lined up with the center of the room and 1 foot at 45. We have this immense base. We can do a lot more work. Work with the legs, opening the arms, filling the chest with more air, soothing the nervous system, healing the body. And we're working with our friends, so there's a resonance of this same feeling throughout the whole building. Now coming back, we'll step towards the windows and ride the waves. So now the arms have more of a sense of agency like the legs do. We're not floating now, we're kind of enjoying this rhythm of exertion. So each movement has its own personality. Let's switch and go towards the trees. And come back to the center. And again, we hold still and observe the life in the body. The quality of the life in the body is very different from when we were sitting. All this deliberate rhythmic movement has got the heart pumping more. You might feel the pulse in your fingertips or your wrists, palms of your hands. So we take mindfulness to a moving body and mindfulness to a still body and explore the rhythm of life. There's always a rhythm. We step towards the street and let's rock back first and then move towards the street and join our hands together and move back. Again, we're massaging the heart, massaging the lungs, massaging the liver and the spleen. All these systems are working together to filter toxins in the body, and we're suddenly feeling a lot better than when we sat down. And coming back to the center, feeling that balance, the second stage of balance with the feet parallel under the shoulders. There's a certain kind of reassurance and balance and composure, composing yourself, and then putting it into motion towards the trees. Enjoying a different aspect of life. Large movements, wider base, more flexibility, more creativity. You could work this into some sort of a dance. And coming back to our center, we'll pause and just read the body. Scanning from the feet all the way through the legs and the torso to the crown of the head. What offers itself to your awareness? And then how does it change? We have a moment of awareness, and then it unfolds into the next moment. Does the sensation get greater, lesser, disappear altogether? Does the wandering mind go to another spot in the body? Okay, thank you for your patience. Have a good day.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Kate, and I get to do announcements and to take care of the community. It's really cool to sit up here. We have lots going on, as usual. Let's see. Next weekend is the Stewardship Circle retreat. So if you're part of the Stewardship Circle and you want to come next Saturday, please go to the website and sign up. If you're part of the Stewardship Circle, there is no cost, but it's really helpful to know how many people are coming. Also, if you want to attend and you're not part of the Stewardship Circle, sign up, make a donation, and come. And of course, if you can't afford a donation, come anyway. We have the Four Foundations 10-month class starting the 9th of March. The 10-month Already Awake class starts next Wednesday. There's been a little confusion. Those classes, they are once a month for 10 months with a retreat, a day-long retreat or two. So if you need more information about that, please do see me. And there's lots of information on the website. Robert is doing a retreat in Seattle on April 9th. So if you happen to be in the neighborhood, he will be up in Seattle. We have Dharma consults for those of you who might be interested in talking to a teacher. And those are available after the Dharma talk today. They're in this little room over here. There's a sign-up list at the back of the room. Gregory will be doing the consults today. Gregory, raise your hand. Thank you. And if you would please, if you're going to sign up, please sign up sequentially. And when it's time, if you would wait in the Dharma hall, because we find it hard to find you if you've come to the living room for hospitality. Today is our potluck, which means there's lots of goodies in there. If you've never been through the magic door, please do come. Meet friends, have some good food, coffee, tea, and it's a good chance to talk to somebody who might know a little bit about the Dharma. And that's cool. If you want to know what we're doing, we have two ways of finding out. I'm just reflecting on how we ever figure out what we're doing. However, the calendar. Robert and I last week had the calendaring adventure of a lifetime. He had gone over his calendar, I swear, a half a dozen times. And when I went over it, there was a mistake. And after I got done going over it, he found a mistake. And so if you're signed up for one of the classes, please do check the latest announcements for the correct dates. We are imperfect beings. Anyway, signing up, we have two lists. We have the listserv where the community talks to one another and share resources and opinions and chatter, and that's a wonderful thing. And the other one is just an email list where you only get official announcements. So the list for both of those, there's a sign up at the back of the room. And it's also, everything's also on the website. Thank you, Steve. Our wonderful volunteers. Donna is our term for giving from the heart that we do to sustain our community. Obviously, the building and our scholarships and the things that we do on a regular basis do take money. So there's a wooden box at the back of the room that will happily receive your disposable income, only if given with great love from your heart. Or you can go online and do a one-time donation, or you can join our stewardship circle, which is very, very useful because that's a commitment to give monthly, and then we know what kind of income we have coming in. So I thank you very much for your attention this morning. I love you all.
In keeping with today's Dharma reflection, I actually am overcoming calendar phobia. The reticence to make commitments months out or years out. And I don't know that you have calendar phobia, Kate, but between the two of us, we have quite a good time, quite an amazing time of... What is it? Date deficit, DDD. DDD. It's the 3D disorder.
If you think a date's wrong, it may be. Please check with
It's, yeah. It was a little wild. Where is this? Come on now. Oh, did I print it? Please let's all take a long, slow, deep, conscious breath together. And one more. And maybe let's take that breath and let your arms stretch back like this and open the chest. And one more, just like that. This is a little short prose poem, sort of, from Joko Beck. Intelligent practice always deals with just one thing: the fear at the base of human existence, the fear that I am not. And of course, I am not. But the last thing I want to know is that. I am impermanence in itself, in a rapidly changing human form that appears solid. I fear to see what I really am, an ever-changing energy field. I don't want to be that. So good practice is about fear. Fear takes the form of constantly thinking, speculating, analyzing, fantasizing. With all that activity, we create a cloud cover to keep ourselves safe in make-believe practice. True practice is not safe. It is anything but safe. But we don't like that. So we obsess with our feverish efforts to achieve our version of the personal dream. Such obsessive practice is itself just another cloud between ourselves and reality. The only thing that matters is seeing with an impersonal searchlight, seeing things as they actually are. When the personal barrier drops away, why do we have to call it anything? We just live our lives, and when we die, we just die. And there's no problem anywhere. Please raise your hand if you experience anxiety or fear in your life. Please take a look around. Isn't that interesting? It's kind of the way we are, or it's an integral part of us. As long as there's a separate self, separate identity, there's anxiety. I was prompted to speak about this today because of an anxiety experience that I've had over the last few days. But I want to read a little something before I go to that. Wikipedia. Easier to read it than try to speak of it. So bear with me, it's not long. Anxiety is an emotion characterized by an unpleasant state of inner turmoil, often accompanied by nervous behavior such as pacing back and forth, somatic complaints, and rumination. It is the subjectively unpleasant feelings of dread over anticipated events, such as the feeling of imminent death. Anxiety is not the same as fear, which is a response to real or perceived immediate threat, whereas anxiety is the expectation of future threat. Anxiety is a feeling of fear, uneasiness, and worry, usually generalized and unfocused as an overreaction to a situation that is only subjectively seen as menacing. It's often accompanied by muscular tension, restlessness, fatigue, and problems in concentration. Anxiety can be appropriate, but when experienced regularly, the individual may suffer from an anxiety disorder. People facing anxiety may withdraw from situations which have provoked anxiety in the past. There are various types of anxiety. Existential anxiety can occur when a person faces angst, an existential crisis, or nihilistic feelings. People can also face calendar, mathematical. How did that appear here? Somatic anxiety, stage fright, or test anxiety. Social anxiety and stranger anxiety are caused when people are apprehensive around strangers or other people in general. Furthermore, anxiety has been linked with physical ailments such as IBS and can heighten other mental illnesses such as OCD or obsessive compulsive disorder and panic disorder. Anxiety can be either a short-term state or a long-term trait, whereas trait anxiety is worry about future events close to the concept of neuroticism. Anxiety disorders are a group of mental disorders characterized by feelings of anxiety and fear. Anxiety disorders are partially genetic but may also arise due to drug use, including alcohol, caffeine, benzodiazepines, which are often prescribed to treat anxiety, as well as withdrawal from drugs of abuse, etc., etc., etc. Anxiety is distinguished from fear, which is an appropriate cognitive and emotional response to a perceived threat and is related to the specific behaviors of fight or flight responses, defensive behavior or escape. It occurs in situations only perceived as uncontrollable and unavoidable, but not realistically so. And so it goes on from there. I wanted to go back to Joko Beck's poem for a moment before I speak of the personal piece. My moving the skeleton here was not by accident. We have this skeleton here as a useful meditation object. And it was, the idea arose years ago when I was in Thailand, and I went to two of the great monasteries. One was Wat Pah Pong, which is the monastery of Ajahn Chah, where Jack Kornfield practiced. And Ajahn Chah, a very famous master of the last century. At the front of his big Dharma hall, you could sit 500 people in it easily. On the left side, there's a full-size skeleton, and it has a bullet hole in the head. And it's got a little explanation. And it's the skeleton of a woman who was a great devotee of Ajahn Chah, who took her life, got very depressed and took her life. And her family decided that they would make a gift to him of this skeleton, of this body, and they did what they needed to do to make it into a skeleton. And the inscription is, as you are now, so once was I, as I am now, so you will be. So that's there, and then in a jar in formaldehyde is a almost term child, fetus, baby. There wasn't a story with that, but we have these two representations of death. And not symbolically, but here it is, right? This is what we are. And they had a skeleton also at Wat Pah Nanachat, which is the monastery for Westerners. So she says, the fear at the base of human existence. Intelligent practice deals with just one thing, the fear that at the base of human existence, the fear that I am not. And then she says, of course, I am not. Which is If we really could realize that, if that would really be our deep, personal, direct experience, then we wouldn't be anxious anymore. Because who's anything to happen to? But we go around with this sense of I, and that I can be most instructive, or the study of that I, the examination, the mindful observation of that I is the essence of the practice. So this moment is like this. If we were to practice in that way, what's happening right now? What's the body sensation like? What's the mood like? Not what's the mood like and then we go into thought and start thinking about it, but mood colors everything. It's this perceptual filter through which we observe the world. And most people never observe mood as mood. Instead, we are the mood. Right? I am depressed, or I am anxious, rather than there is depression and these are the symptoms, or there is anxiety and these are the symptoms. As I was thinking of speaking of this today, I remembered a story in one of Jack Kornfield's books. He was traveling in a taxi with Ajahn Chah, and the taxi driver was a madman. And Jack looked over, and Ajahn Chah was very calm, and Jack was holding on for dear life, and they got out of the taxi, and Ajahn Chah said, "Scary, wasn't it?" So it would seem as though Ajahn Chah, great master, knew fear, that his personality, his personness, still got frightened. Yet perhaps he had a particular perspective on it. So I had the great privilege the last week to be in Colorado. Friends of Jennifer's and mine have a house in Winter Park, a little north of Winter Park. And their house is at about 8,500 feet. And that's an important part of the detail that I didn't put together until we were talking after I got home. I experienced a lot of anxiety up there. Now had some time to ski. I was working on a writing project, but I was alone. First night, I got in late, driving from Boulder. I didn't sleep very well. I kept waking up sort of out of breath and anxious. And I remembered in retrospect, funny, I feel teary now thinking of this. It was potent. Back in the late, just before the turn of the century, I went to Tibet. Flew into Nepal and then flew to the west to Simacot, or to, doesn't matter where, and then up to Simacot. And then we went, it was on a group of us, we hiked into Tibet, and I got altitude sickness going over the pass into Tibet. And what should have been done was I should have gone back down 2,000 feet and waited till I got well again, but there was no provision for this in the plan. And so I went on, and I did a lot of waking up at night gasping, like, and the symptoms didn't go away over the next 2 weeks. And when I came back, I went to see a pulmonologist who told me that my chances of dying every time I went to sleep were greater than 10%. And I woke up afraid of dying. I was just terrified. And the place we went to go hike around Mount Kailash. And that's in the town Darchen. Above Darchen, about 2,000 feet above the town, is a little plateau where they take the bodies up to do sky burial, and they hack them up and they give them to the birds. But there's also these giant dogs up there, and they're the ones that get most of it. And I remember saying to my partner then, with some terror, please, I know it shouldn't matter, but if I die here, please don't put me up there. It was a long drive. It was about 5 days drive back across the plateau and then down into Kathmandu. I said, please take me back to Kathmandu and burn the body. I just didn't want to get eaten by those dogs. And it seemed overly dramatic and mildly hysterical until I got home and found out how risky it was. That it could have been any time I went to sleep. So memories of that, they almost got to consciousness as soon as I put things together when I got home. All of a sudden it became clear that I was having flashbacks unconsciously. I was experiencing altitude. It wasn't altitude sickness, but altitude effects lying in that bed at 80-some thousand feet, whatever it was. 8,000 feet. 80,000 would be a little thin. So, the anxiety took the form of being kind of obsessed about forgetting things, losing things, not having something I needed. Going skiing and if I got everything and I was watching it. It was like, this is so interesting. I'm not usually anxious like this. Why am I so anxious? And it was actually only after getting down to the airport in Denver when this layer of anxiety just vanished, that then I could see in retrospect how anxious I'd been. Right? It's kind of the frog in the water on the fry pan. It doesn't realize when it's time to jump. It just got. It took the form of, well, am I doing the right thing? Should I work on the writing project this morning, or should I go ski? Over obviously really trivial choices, there was this oscillating back and forth and not knowing, have I made the right decision? Kind of stuff that doesn't usually, it's there, but it usually doesn't have much juice to it. It did have there was a salutary, there was a silver lining in one instance, in that I went rather late to the ski resort, and the parking lot was pretty full, so I had to walk about a quarter mile. And awkward, with skis and boots and all that stuff. And the anxiety, I was so aware of the anxiety, kind of, what is this? Why is there so much? It's so odd. And I got to the locker room and discovered I couldn't rent a locker because I didn't have my wallet. And so I realized, well, I must have left it in the car. So I put my stuff there, and then there was a kind of humor about it. It's like, now this is really funny. Because, and the other thing was, in the dukkha, suffering and craving, the cause of suffering is craving, and the craving was that I wanted to become a person skiing. I didn't want to be a person carrying these awkward things, and I wanted that state of euphoria when the self disappears and there's just skiing. There was wanting that wasn't happening. I found that very interesting too, how imagine suffering over whether one is not skiing or not. I mean, this is really first world suffering. But the impatience, and I remember taking kids skiing and how it's like it's agonizing because they're so I want it now. Well, someone in here, some aspect, some program in here wanted it now. And so that I actually found myself internally grinning. It's like, wow, look at the suffering caused by this image of being somewhere other than I am right now. So I walked back to the car on the way. On the way, I encountered, there was a drop-off place, and there were people dropping their skis, and then they go park, and then they walk back. And I asked one car, and a young woman, maybe 35 years old, next car over, said, "Oh, I'll take you." And she was doing something very interesting. She had a beautiful 3-year-old daughter, and the daughter was perched on a snowbank. And she said to her daughter, I'll be back in a few minutes." And I thought, now that's a mother. Jennifer, my wife Jen, read a wonderful book about a year or so ago. I highly recommend it to any of you with children. It's called Free Range Kids. And it's written by the woman that the newspaper is called the worst mother in the world, because she let her 11-year-old son ride the New York subway. And what it points out is this absolute paranoia we have about our children not being safe. That we live in, our children are safer than they were when I was a kid and traveling by the city bus at age 5. There's less violence. Oh, and my favorite factoid. When you ask young people these days, not little kids, but college-age kids, what are you most afraid of? Terrorism. Do you know that your chances of being killed by a refrigerator falling on you are several times more than terrorism? We are not at risk of terrorism. I mean, some people are, and it's horrible when it happens. But this hype, this tremendous hype about, it could happen at any second. We're much more in, even domestic terrorism, which is much more dangerous than Islamic terrorism. But we drive around in cars, and we walk around in communities of handguns, and we pay no attention to that. Like driving here in the car is so much more likely to be injured or killed. But we've fallen into a trance. We've fallen into a trance of terror, and it's being manipulated to the max. That's my soapbox. So anyway, I my first statement was, "Wow, what a great mother! You're leaving your daughter here. Fantastic! Look at the self-esteem that you're giving her right here." Oh, and one more thing, I have to say this about the children abductions. The fellow who created, the children's pictures on the milk boxes, the fellow was basically unemployed, and he figured out how to create a lot of hysteria and make a large salary, large income. The children on those milk cartons were abducted by non-custodial parents. There's not an epidemic of children being stolen. There's an epidemic of divorces and crazy people snatching their kids, or desperate people snatching their kids. But when my children, my 34-year-old son, was a small child, I carried a whistle. And if he disappeared, like in the Safeway supermarket, if he disappeared, I was prepared to blow the whistle and yell, "Lock the doors!" Because I would have known he'd been abducted. Totally paranoid delusional. Culturally accepted paranoid delusional. So to your parents, I really encourage you, read that book and relax about your kids. It's something, how many years I think you'd have to leave your child out playing by themselves to get them abducted if you wanted to. It's 197,000 years. Yeah. So if you want to get rid of your kids, you got to do it a different way. So anyway, I went back with this young woman, and then we walked back together, and this is the silver lining. She shared with me that she was a cancer survivor, and that she did this when I said I taught meditation. And we then had an impromptu meditation teaching session. She also said spontaneously, if we can't find your wallet, my wallet wasn't in the car. If we can't find your wallet when we get back there, I'll lend you $20. Nice. Of course, my wallet was in my pocket. It wasn't my usual wallet, it was my little wallet, and it was right there, but I'd been so anxious to find it, to get skiing, that I couldn't find it. Now, I'd like to say it happened so that I could meet this young woman and teach her. Who knows? But I literally broke out in peals of laughter when I found it. It was like, how fantastic. I mean, what a perfect demonstration of the insanity of anxiety and how it makes us not pay attention. Having a sense of humor about our neurotic craziness is really helpful. And I think arises from mindfulness because we watch the personality do his or her thing, and it's so often insane. The opinions about things, the reactions to things. As I was thinking of this morning, the distinction between anxiety, which is worrying about something in the future that probably won't happen, and fear. I had a couple of moments of fear last week also. There was a moment when I was traveling rather fast and crossing another trail, and a person who was quite a beginner did something at the last second that really didn't make much sense. And it looked for a second like we were going to hit. And that was fear, right? It wasn't that big, but I watched as I took evasive action. That was a moment when the fear arose, and it was useful because it galvanized the fight-flight response and took me out of harm's way. And so these phenomena, the fear and fear in particular, has tremendous selective advantage. If we don't have fear, we wouldn't make it as a species. But there's this way that with anxiety we can get caught in the fantasies of something bad happening, and also in the craving to be, in the instance that I was speaking of with skiing, the craving to become something. I want to become different than I am right now. So to finish off the altitude thing, I was talking to Jen on the phone as I dropped out of the mountains, this big long hill out of the mountains, and I kept feeling better and better and better and better. And then Jen mentioned oxygen deficiency, and all of a sudden it came together, boom. And what I've noticed since then, it was just yesterday, what I've noticed since then is the same provocations arise, like, have I got my keys, or have I? It's the same checking things are things together, are things organized, would arise, but it wouldn't have that level of on it. And one of the things I'm grateful for this experience is a greater compassion for those of us that suffer from anxiety disorders. That my experience over time, over years, has been less and less of that. It's not so much a part of it's still there, but it's not that much a part of my ongoing experience. And I know for some of you in this room, it really is. And I encourage you to practice with diligence and exercise and get good sleep if you can, and get mental health help if you can, or chemicals if you can, because it really is debilitating. And we can things like not having my wallet was a small example of how we can miss the possibility of being intimate with our loved ones because we're afraid something will happen to them, or because we'll There's another track that isn't so clear to me yet. Trying to remember a fellow's name, teacher in San Francisco. Humor, funny. Wes Nisker, thank you. Wes Nisker wrote a book called Buddha's Nature. And very, very funny fellow. And he's done stand-up routine at 2 or 3 of the teachers' conferences I've gone to, stand-up Buddhist meditative humor. And anyway, one of the things he pointed out that any human being, to be a human being is to be anxious. Because we're at risk all the time. Right? And he pointed out that historically, we don't have any armor. We're very vulnerable. And not so very long ago, the lion took the baby. Or the car went out of control on the freeway and someone died. Or that we do live in a constant, we are under constant possibility of really bad things happening, and they will. Right, as Stephen Levine put it so beautifully, every relationship ends in separation or death. So there's a sobering which comes from the Buddhist reflections, hence the I am of the nature to age, to sicken, to die. And the purpose of that is to bring us nose to nose with this reality that we try really hard not to think about. But the mind thinks about it anyway. And so it's one of the reasons, there's a bunch, but one of the reasons we don't meditate regularly is because we will encounter the anxiety that's there. And we can meditate a little bit, and it's really useful for stress management. We can meditate a little bit more, and it's really useful for psychological and emotional health because we see the neurotic mind, as I was doing with that anxiety up in the mountains. But then there's that third level where meditation, it really comes into its full development or full sphere, which is around the question of who am I? Who am I, and what is going on that I can't control my mind? I mean, that is the central question, isn't it? How come I can't control my mind? And what we tend to do is to say, well, there's something wrong with me, or I have to try harder, or as opposed to the realization that the mind is fundamentally out of control, and the insight or the meditation, the gift of the Dharma, is that we start to take it much less seriously, and we find it to be less personal. And so our meditation changes from striving to make some state happen to being present with the state that's here and discovering that it's not me, it's not personal. It's just a state. Now that's hard. I've never come across anything harder, really. Years ago, my practice had revealed to me a lot of fear. Every time I sat down to meditate, I was aware of kind of a tightness and I couldn't find any reason for it. It wasn't there was nothing. I look around cognitively. So why am I afraid? And I couldn't find anything, but it was there every damn time I sat down to meditate. The mind would be very restless, and then it would stop being so restless, and then there'd just be this. And after a while, I called Ruth Dennison, and what I wanted was I wanted a trick. Right? I don't want to feel this fear. And when I went below the fear, I went below calling it fear into just the kind of psychophysiological experience, to which there was a great deal of aversion. And it wouldn't go away with concentration. I could distract. As soon as the mind would wander off to something else, there wasn't fear, because they can only do one thing at a time. But anyway, I called Ruth, and I didn't get the answer I wanted or expected. She said, "Yeah, darling, I often wake up in the night, and it's as though every cell in my body is screaming, 'I don't want to die.'" What? That's not the magic trick I wanted. I wanted some. Now, there are lots of things one could do. One could do a mantra practice and get more concentrated and so on. But rather than that, and she then suggested, that's the nature of the being. Every cell wants to stay alive. And it's not going to. And in that process of turning toward it is where freedom comes from, because that sense of fear is also not personal. It's just what happens in a human being as they confront their existential impermanence. And I've seen in my own journey and in the journey working with many people, as their practice matures, as they really become more engaged, that fear really does come as a powerful visitor. And it's not because we're doing something wrong, it's because it's part of us. And to the degree we can turn toward it and embrace it and open, then we become more free and joyful and can live our lives more fully, because we're not holding back. Right. Oh, one last poem. I always have to look for this. Helen Keller. Security is mostly a superstition. It does not exist in nature, nor do the children of men as a whole experience it. Avoiding danger is no safer in the long run than outright exposure. Life is either a daring adventure or nothing. So this willingness to experience that which is fear is what allows us to step more fully into our lives. So we have a few minutes if anyone would like to comment or question. I have here this sacred relic from the Buddha that if you speak into it like this, it will amplify your voice. Anyone? Can you take this down, Jim? you go.
Thanks, Robert. That was an interesting talk. One question and one comment. Question, how was the snow? I'm also a skier. And comment, I'm somebody who, I think I was drawn to practice in large part because of my own experiences with anxiety. And I've noticed that before kind of inspecting it and beginning to accept it, the place that I tended to go with it was, I come from an anxious stock. My parents are anxious. My relatives are anxious. That's come through to me. That's just the way that I am. And most people don't have to deal with this. And that that was a hard thing to deal with.
Right.
So it's helpful to have it brought out into the light, I think, and to address the fact that fear is, a constant, and that it isn't necessarily something that we can extinguish.
Please raise your hand if anxiety is a significant challenge in your life. Take a look around. The snow was great, especially the first day. We had about 6 inches of new powder. It was nice. With anxiety, as with every emotive state, the great relief comes from recognizing that there's nothing, we don't have to do anything about it. The seeing is the doing. And to localize it, where does it exist in the body? What are the thoughts that are happening? And to cultivate, to realize, to inhabit that which is aware rather than that which the awareness is aware of. Right? Because what we do is we consolidate, or we solidify, I'm anxious. And then we get into war with, I don't want to be anxious, I want to fight the anxiety. As opposed to recognizing, there's anxiety and these are the symptoms, and it doesn't matter. It's just another emotional state. Now, easy to say. And my experience with observing it up in the mountains, that's why I'm so grateful for the experience of having such an outbreak of it, was it's painful. It's really painful. And accepting it is a challenge. It is, however, aside from, if there's something that we can do to alleviate the anxiety, like get the project finished, but for that anxiety that's just there is just part of us, what else can we do other than ultimately surrender and realize, well, this personality, this organism, is anxious, has these symptoms, and to stop fighting with it. There's a practice from the Tibetans. It goes like this. Please think about those situations in your life that are causing you anxiety or causing you suffering in some way or another. The things that you might say, I wish it wasn't this way. I wish my life wasn't like this. I wish my heritage weren't like this. Or I wish this and this hadn't happened in my childhood. And then articulate them as clearly as you can. And then think about how these challenges are exactly what you need to help you wake up. And then thirdly, stop fighting with them. They exist. And the shorthand for stop fighting with them is say yes to them. Yes, there's a lot of anxiety. Yes, there's depression. Yes, I'm freaking out in my life. Yes, 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 yes. Which allows us to experience it as it is. Just read you this one last thing before we have to end. Where is it? This is from Krishnamurti. Many of you have heard it. The people in my classes have heard it many times because it's incredibly powerful.
Robert, could you answer one quick question? And then
After I do this, if there's time. The seeing is the doing. Mindfulness, the moment of awareness, noticing anxiety or fear or jealousy is the doing. Transformation occurs only when none of the following are present. The desire to change the experience. Judgment of the experience. Analysis of the experience. Justification. Grasping. Selfing, making a story about it. Resisting, or, and this is the most cool one I think, believing I am witnessing. Desire to change it, judgment, analysis, justification, grasping, selfing, resisting, and believing I am witnessing. In other words, the seeing is the doing. Mindfulness is enough. Because mindfulness, when that awareness opens spontaneously, there's just an experience. There's no I that's having the experience. Michael.
Thank you. I was going to make a comment about how I know I get a lot of anxiety if, say, I have to do a speech. If I don't practice enough and I have to get in front of an audience, I get very nervous. Whereas if I practice quite a bit, I'm okay with it. So I'm glad you made the comment about just getting the project done, because a lot of our anxiety stems from that. The other thing I was wondering about is how much does our anxiety just stems from the fact that we try to do so much, and we live in a culture in which we're constantly doing things, and we have technology which enables us to do more and more things. And it just seems like it just keeps going faster and faster. So I'm wondering if we just consciously try to slow down, if that wouldn't, in fact, alleviate a lot of it. And that's sort of what meditation is as well. But comments?
I had an image come to mind, and I've experienced it on any number of occasions. When people come on retreat, I meet them. You know, we're kind of like this when we come and people are talking real fast, and then about 3 days or 5 days into the retreat, a person will come to me and say, I'm just feeling so anxious. My mind is really out of control, and they have no idea how, in a certain way, how ridiculous it sounds, because who they were 4 days earlier was a crazy person. And then we get on retreat and we we don't have the electronics, and we don't have the performance, and we don't have social interaction, and the whole organism relaxes. So absolutely yes, we're part of the drivenness to have the right experience or buy the right this, or that it makes us crazier and crazier. Yeah. So let's close our computers. So please stay. There's quite a feed in there, beautifully presented. That's quite remarkable. And please stay and have some goodies and some social connection. And I hope you'll come to the retreat next week. The Stewardship Circle on compassion. And we have a wonderful day of compassion planned. It will have some pain in it. right? Because about what do we have compassion? Well, we have compassion about the fact that we are really hurting deeply. And so coming in contact with the pain, the Buddha calls compassion the sensitive heart's natural trembling when faced with suffering. So we will encounter our suffering and the suffering of each other, and then practices that bring compassion into being. So consider coming for that. Please now let's make a big circle, and the kids will come in and we'll have our final extravaganza.
I totally forgot how tiny this was.
We do. It's a herd.
16 children.
Oh, the microphone. Where'd the mic go? It's right there. Oh, you got it already. Thank you. Are you the singer today? No. Great. Any of you out there posing as grown-ups who'd like to reveal your true nature and come and be with us, you are more than welcome. No one ever takes me up on it, but it's fun in here. This is where it's happening. Can I have a hand from one of you here? Or can I hold your hands together? We could be three of us. Hi, you coming in here? Okay, want to sit here? All right. Oh, now this is sweet. All right. Hi. Oh. She's melting. We call that a pooper schnitzel in my house. All right, sweetie. So let us hold a hand and a heart. We are so vulnerable. We have such tender beings. Let's think a kind thought for ourselves. It's so easy to think unkind thoughts. But we're quite capable of thinking a kind thought. And maybe it's the thought, I love you, with your own name at the end. The great mantra. And then feel the hand on your left and give that a little squeeze and wish that person well in whatever way makes sense for you. And to the person on your right, and then to everyone in the room, everyone who's ever been in this room. This room has been used for connection and worship since 1930. And then there's 7 billion of us humans here on the earth and countless others. Let's wish everybody well. To all of us that flash into being and dance in the sun for a little while and then vanish. Okay, and now we probably have some young voices who will sing. Coming over this way. The great mantra, may all beings be happy, and then sadhu, meaning may it be thus. Okay. Stay here, sweetie. May all beings be happy. May all beings be happy. May all beings be happy. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And now we practice patience. And then everyone in the room, make a wish. What would your greatest wish be for all beings? and I will stabilize the table. And then on the usual count, we'll all get to blow out the candle. Well, let's be patient again, just for fun. That's the experience of patience. 1, 2, 3. Yes, we did it.
Yes, we did it!
Yay! So please do come and join us for coffee and tea and goodies, and thanks for coming.